Microsoft provided server controls that don't map to a single HTML control are often called rich controls. In this section, we'll be looking at the calendar control, which allows you to graphically display the current date and enables users to select dates in a scheduling application or any place else you want to display a date. We'll also look at the Add Rotator control, which displays and cycles through a series of advertisement banners, and the XML control, which displays the contents of an XML document or even displays the results of an XSL transformation. Now note that these aren't anything special. They're simply server controls that Microsoft has provided, but you can definitely create your own. There's no magic here. These controls are just classes that represent combinations of other controls that perform a specific task. Let's start with the calendar control. This control allows you to display a month at a time. Users can select a day, a week, or an entire month. It has links, optionally, to the next and previous months, and the links trigger a postback for dates, so users can select a date, or select a week, select a month, and this triggers a postback so you can react to it in your own code. The control includes properties that allow you to enable and disable various parts of the control. You can turn on or off the header, the grid lines, the next or previous links, the title, and more. You can even handle a special event, the day render event, which allows you to display each date in any way you like. It gives you a chance to format individual dates. In the simplest case, all you have to do is place a copy of the control on a page, and most likely you'll want to react to the selection changed event so you can have something happen on the page once the user selects a day, a week, or a month. Let's try it out. I've loaded the sample project and then displayed the sample page for this topic, calselectionmode.aspx, in a browser. It's a real simple page. It just has a calendar control, which I've plopped onto the page, but I've written a bunch of code and user interface to allow you to interact with that page at runtime. For example, there's a show day header property, which allows me to show or hide the day header information. We can show or hide the grid lines using the show grid lines property. Now, what this proves, of course, is that you can set these properties at runtime or at design time. We can show the previous and next month links or turn them off, and we can show or hide the title. We can modify the cell padding. Let me change this to a big number. And now we have a large amount of cell padding. Put them back to 2. We can change the cell spacing. There we go, and now we have a lot of spacing around each cell. So you can see that you have a lot of control over the way this thing displays. You can also choose things like the first day of the week. There's a default which uses the current locale, or you can choose a specific first day of the week, like Tuesday if you want. I'll go back to the default. In my locale, that's Sunday. I can choose the date selection mode. Right now it's day, but I can make it day or week, and you'll see I get a little graphic here. Now the graphic for that is supplied in my own code, and if you examine the code you can see that. Here if I select a week, it selects the entire week. Here we can select a month as well, and now you can select a day, a week, or an entire month. And it selects only the month that's listed up here. Pretty clever. Let's put it back to day. Of course, there's an option which you saw there to only select none, which allows the users to look at the calendar but not select anything at all. We can choose the day name format. It can be short, first letter, first 2 letters, or the shortest possible listing for that day name. Let's choose first 2 letters, and there you'll see that's what we get. We can choose the next previous format. I can choose short month or full month. If I choose full month, I get the full month name. There we go. And I can even choose here, there it is, custom text. If I choose custom text, it can use either text or a graphic. Here you can see that For previous month text, I'm using a less than sign, and for the next month text, I'm using an image, and the image I've specified using HTML, that is a little image tag. Now I will point out that if you want to do this, you have to take an extra step, and we'll discuss that in just a moment. Now for selecting the month text and selecting the week text, you can also specify any item you want, and I've specified a greater than sign for selecting a month, and for selecting a week, the greater than sign. To demonstrate that, I need to go uncheck Use Graphics for Selection Links, because that runs a little bit of code which forces all these things to show graphics. Let me uncheck that. There we go. And so now you can see up here the less than sign, and if I turn this to day, week, month, you'll see the items I've entered, the greater than sign and the double greater than sign for each of these items. If I use graphics for selection links, for each of those items, I've supplied a graphic item in the code using, well, something like this to represent each of the text-based properties. As I mentioned, you can use graphics instead of text. You just supply an image tag as the value of the property. You can use this for the next month text, previous month text, and any property that ends with text for the calendar control. You do need to be careful about cross-site scripting issues. Previous versions of ASP.NET happily allowed you to enter script or HTML as properties of a control, but this allows bad people to make your site do bad things. To avoid this, ASP.NET, the current version, blocks setting any property to anything that resembles HTML or script. For my example, I wanted to do that. So in the example or in your own sites, you'll need to modify the page header for each page and set the validate request header property to false in the page header. If you do that, ASP.NET no longer complains about having cross-site scripting. That is, you no longer ask ASP.NET to validate the request. Of course, this does leave you open to any sort of cross-site scripting spoofing, but for my examples, that really isn't an issue. There are, of course, a number of other style properties you can set on a calendar control. I've made a page that allows me to set each of those properties one by one so you can see what they affect. For example, there's a day style property, and you can set the style of the individual days. There's a day header style property that allows you to set the style of the header. The next prev style lets you set the style of these markers here. There's the other month day style. That allows you to programmatically or at design time set the style of the days that are in the month other than the one you're showing. That's these days here. The selected day style, let me select a date. We can set its style. I just made it big in this case. There's the selector style, which is this information over here. The title style lets me modify this. The today day style, there's today's date and it's got a certain style. And the weekend day style allows me to apply a styling to the weekend days. And in each case, all I'm doing here is setting a property of, for example, the weekend day style. The cal demo, that's the name of this control, .weekend day style has properties like back color, fore color, font, and so on. And you just set those properties either programmatically or at design time to affect the layout of your calendar. Of course, you don't want the calendar to actually end up looking like this. It's a little ugly. But you can, in your code or design time, set any of these properties to match the look and feel of your website. The calendar control provides 3 events that are specific to this particular control, and those are the day render event, which occurs when each day is created in the control hierarchy for the calendar control, and it gives you a chance to render the day any way you like. There's the selection changed event, which occurs when the user selects a date. And there's the visible month changed event, which occurs when the user moves from one month to another month. Now we'll look at the day render event later on, but you can use the selection changed and visible month changed events to give users some sort of indication of where they are, where they've been, and which dates they've currently selected. Let's look at an example that demonstrates these two events. I've loaded the sample page workwithdates.aspx, which demonstrates the two events we're going to look at, the selection changed and visible month changed events. This page does a number of things. It allows me to move from one month to another, and as I do, you'll see down here a label updates to display the current date and the previous date. Now, this demo just assumes the date is the first day of the selected month. So here, previous date was April 1st, new date is May 1st. We go from month to month, that updates accordingly. Down here, we can choose the date selection mode. I can choose day and select a single day, and we'll see that single day here. Can select day week, and now I can select a single day or an entire week. Notice this label here updates to display what's been selected. And in the list box, we see a list of all the selected dates. If I change this to day, week, month, I can select the entire month, and now you'll see down here in the list box all of the selected dates in the current month. Now there are a number of things going on here, including handling both of those events. Let's look at the code to see what's going on. As the page loads, you'll see here the code calls the fillListWithEnum function. You pass that function the drop-down list you want to fill and the type of an enumerated value, an enumeration. This fillListWithEnum function in the common class takes care of displaying all the values from that enumeration in the drop-down list. I've used that a number of times already in this demonstration. Let's look at the code now. This code, given an enumeration and a list control to fill, will fill the list with all the names of the enumeration and the values with the corresponding values. So, how does it work? If you look here, we created an array of strings called aStirNames and call the system.enum.getNames method given the type, which must be an enumeration, so I check for that here, and stores it away in this array. We do the same for the getValues method. The interesting thing is the getNames method returns a string array. The getValues method returns just an array. So the declarations are different. We'll clear out all the items in the list box, or the drop-down list, whichever you pass in, and now we'll iterate through all the items in the enumeration, and for each one, create a new list item, set the text and the value properties of the list item to the name of the enumerated value and the value of that enumerated value, and then we'll add that to the list. Once we're done, we have a list or a drop-down list which displays all the enumerated values, and when you select one of those items, it returns as its value the corresponding integer from the enumeration. This is not something that has anything to do with really ASP.NET or the calendar control, but it's a useful technique for displaying a list of enumerated values on a page, should you need that in your own pages. But back to our story. There's a selection changed event for the calendar control, which allows you to react to the user changing the selection. So if the selection mode currently is none, that's an enumerated value we're checking here. In that case, we set our label selection that tells us what is currently selected to be nothing at all. But if the user selected a day, then we add to our list box the selected date from the calendar converted to a short date string. If the selection mode is day week or day week month, in that case we know we have more than one date selected, and we need to iterate through all of the date time values in the selected dates property of the calendar control. In that case, we'll add each of them converted to a short date string to the list box. We also need to be able to display what kind of thing is selected. So the display label method, which we'll call in a moment, uses the count property of the selected dates collection of the calendar control. If it's 1, we display day. If it's 7, we display week. If it's anything else, we display month, because those are the only options. You either have nothing selected, which we already took care of, or you have 1 day, 7 days, or 28, 29, 30, or 31 days selected, and in that case, we display month. Now you'll see down here, there is code that sets the selection mode based on what you selected in the drop-down list of selection modes. You can see that we need to set the selection mode property to be what we get by parsing the drop-down list which contains selection modes, get its selected item, and the value of that item. We need to parse it as an enumerated value, and that's what system.enum.parse does for us, converts it back to an enumerated value so we can assign it into the selection mode property. Finally, the visible month changed event occurs in the calendar when you change the visible month, and you get handed this month changed event args, which has information about the previous date and the new date. And now I'd like to display both the previous date and the new date in a label on the page. And that's what this code does. It just gets the previous date and the new date and displays them in a label on the page. So we've now handled the visible month changed event, and up here, the selection changed event. Both of those occur as you work with the calendar control. There's another page that demonstrates the day render event. Let me get that one up. Here it is. And this page, if we view it in the browser, displays special days a certain way. Here you can see St. Patrick's Day. Back here, St. Valentine's Day and Groundhog Day and New Year's Day, all highlighted specially. If I unhighlight them, let me uncheck this checkbox, a few things happen. The highlighting goes away, and the dates in other months appear again. If I turn this on, highlighting is back, and the dates in other months totally disappear. How is that code happening? We must have some code that runs as we render each day in the calendar, determining how to render the days in the selected month. Let's go back and look at the code that makes that happen. Here, as the page loads, we're filling an array, 2-column array, set up with room for all the days of the month and the months of the year. And you can see that here we have, for example, January 1st, February 2nd. It's a very sparse array, not a very efficient storage, but it makes the demo pretty simple here. And we have a number of holidays that don't change from year to year in this array. The day render event occurs as the calendar renders each of the days that it has to display. It gets passed a day render event args object, E, which has two interesting properties, day and cell. Day is just a value which tells us interesting things about the day that's going to be rendered. For example, its date. We need to know what date it is, obviously. What day of the month it is. That's its day number text. There's also is other month. Is it in a different month than the one that's currently selected, that is in the outlying region? Is it selectable? Is it currently selected? Is it the current date? And is it a weekend date? Given all that information, you can make choices about how to render this control. The cell property gives us information about the cell within the calendar control. You can set or retrieve its border color, border style, border width, and so on, all the properties of the cell that's currently being rendered. I'm going to store those away into variables, a calendar day variable called D, and a table cell variable called C. Now, I only want to do this special rendering if the checkbox on the page is selected, so I'll check for that first. If the date is in the other month, I just want to clear it out totally. And the way you do that is by clearing, or by calling the clear method, of the controls property of the cell. That is, remove all the controls from the current cell that you're rendering. Otherwise, if it's not in the other month, it's in the right month, we go and retrieve as best we can, the name of the string in the array. Now that might be a null string. So if it isn't a null string, which means we got a match, there is a holiday on the current date we're rendering, in that case we set the forecolor and the background color properties of the cell and set the font to be bold. Now obviously what's going on is ASP.NET is calling this procedure for every date in the month. Only certain dates in the month get rendered at all, and others get this fancy special rendering. So this code isn't terribly efficient. You might want to, if you do something complicated, jump out early if you're not going to render the date specially. In any case, to review what it looks like, let's go back over here, view it in the browser, and you'll see now that if this checkbox is checked, as ASP.NET renders the page, it goes boink, 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 to each date in the calendar, rendering it, and if it finds a holiday that matches, it renders it in this special formatting. If I uncheck it, none of the dates get rendered specially, and the calendar appears normally. Now it's important at this moment to stop and look to see what's going on in the client-side code. How is it that when I click on this, it actually does some work? And you can see it in the status bar in the browser, that when I select this, there's a link associated with this date. It's a JavaScript link, so it's going to run the __do_postback method, passing in CalDemo, that's the name of this control, and some special number 2992. If I go to a different one, you'll see that each one of these has a different special number associated with it. I'm guessing that has something to do with the row and the column within the grid, but whatever. Now, what's going on? Let's go look at the code. In the source for this page, which I got to by choosing View Source in the browser, you can see that there is a div element which contains 4 hidden input controls. One is named event target, __ event target, and event argument. So this and this represent event target and the argument for the event. There's also other information we don't need for this event handler, including the last focus and the view state. All of them are hidden within the page, so they get passed back to the server when I submit the page. There's also some JavaScript code here. The JavaScript gets a reference to the current form, and if that is null, takes form 1 from the current document. Here within the __do postback method, which is the one you saw the link calling in the JavaScript, we pass through 2 parameters. The event target, which was CalDemo in our link, and the event argument, which was that special number corresponding to the cell. And this code checks to make sure we're not already submitting, and if not, then we take the event target argument and put it into that special hidden field. Same thing with the event argument. We put it in the corresponding special hidden input, and then we submit the form. When we submit the form, that sends it back to the server, and on the server side, they can use the information from these 2 hidden input fields to determine what to do as the control renders itself. Now down here, you'll see the layout for that calendar control. For each cell, well, back up a second, you can see it's a table, just a standard HTML table, with an ID of CalDemo with information about the table and its layout, all the style information. And then you'll see for each cell, here's one for example, we have a link and style information, and somewhere along the way we have the date. Oh, that's the wrong one. Let's try one down here that actually is one of those dates. Here we go. This one corresponds to the number 7. You can see over here is the link itself with the JavaScript code to call. So it's a link that when you click it, runs JavaScript code, which places these values into hidden input fields and then submits the page back to the server so the control can be re-rendered on the server side. This code is generic enough so it should work in any browser that supports JavaScript.